All right. Um, Welcome everyone to the Meridian Street Neighborhood Traffic Calming meeting. This is September 10th, 2024, and we're meeting virtually only at 6 p.m. For anyone I haven't met, my name is David Greaves, and I'm working with NDOT in their traffic calming program. I'll be facilitating this meeting and then ultimately doing the design for Meridian. Um, Before we dig into those design details, we're just going to do a quick recap on what the traffic calming program is and some of the ways it works. Basically, this is a program intended for residential streets. Um, that basically just means we really don't favor like commercial corridors or larger arterial roads. Kind of collector and local roads are really all we work on. Um, in general, we favor physical solutions to encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. Basically, that means trying not to rely so much on like the laws and regulations to control speed, but more just doing an engineered design that encourages safer speeds more subtly. And then ultimately, the goal is speed reduction for the most part. So we're going to talk about sort of why that's important and then some of the different tools we have when pursuing that goal. There are 3 E's of traffic calming. Those are education, enforcement, and engineering. Engineering here is bold and underlined because really that's the piece that NDOT has the most opportunity to influence the roadways. Certainly, we do education. We try to reach as many people as we can on like social media and public service announcements. But those can only go so far. Enforcement is great when we have it, but to enforce the speed actively on all of our neighborhood streets would just take a tremendous effort on the part of our police department, and they've got a lot of other things on their plate that they're attending to day to day. To kind of revisit the speed reduction portion, this is all part of Nashville's like initiative to reach Vision Zero, and that is the idea that nobody should have to be seriously injured or killed on Nashville's public roadways. So it's a goal that we take really seriously, and the traffic calming program is sort of part of the many ways that we are pursuing that. The graphic below sort of demonstrates why speed in particular is such an important factor when working on Vision Zero. And it's because a vehicle traveling near 25 miles an hour has a pretty good chance of not killing a person that they were to strike. However, when those speeds climb to the 35 mile an hour and 45 mile an hour range, that likelihood that a person who is hit survives goes way down to almost just above a third. So when we see streets that have problems of excessive speeding, we try to do whatever we can to get those speeds back to a reasonable and safe amount. This is a really popular program. So the map that we're looking at on the right, every one of those lines is a traffic calming project in some degree. So the light purple ones are those that have applied but not yet been selected. The blue ones are ones that have been implemented already. And then any of those other colors are somewhere in between those two states. So Meridian Street was selected in the spring of 2024 among 24 other neighborhood streets all around the county. And they were selected from a backlog of 480 applications that we have on file. So that means is when we did our prioritization effort, this street really rose to the top as demonstrating quite a bit of need for something to be done about the speeds and volumes that we're seeing. I will say that the traffic calming program has some limitations on the kinds of tools we can use to address speeding and other things. So should we come across anything else you'd like to see. Maybe it's like a sidewalk repair or some signage that doesn't quite fit with what we're here to do. We want to make sure everyone is aware of Hub Nashville as a resource to request just about anything from Metro Nashville, whether it's like debris in the road or potholes, anything up to requesting new bikeways, things like that can all be routed through Hub um, in one form or another. A few different ways to access it. You can call 311 and you can access hub.nashville.gov, the website, or there's an app as well that makes it pretty easy to report issues like on out and about. So you can attach photos, things like that. Um, Talking a little bit about how Meridian was selected. This pie chart on the right is sort of the formula we use when we score each of those streets against each other, and we keep it as data driven as possible to make sure we are considering all streets equally. Um, and what makes up the largest component of that score are vehicle speeds and volume. So how many vehicles are driving down the road in a given day. We lean so heavily on those because ultimately, when it comes to the danger of people getting hit by cars, those two factors combined are really the sources of the danger that we're trying to prevent. Now, we also consider crash history. So if there was a vulnerable user injury or fatality anytime in the last 10 years, um, that'll bump you up 15% of that score. Non-driver accommodations, that's sidewalks basically. So if you have sidewalks, you don't score as many points. If you don't have sidewalks, we sort of know that people would have to walk in the street and therefore want to really make sure we're paying attention to how safe that is. And then trip destinations is parks and schools. So if you have a school or a park on or nearby the road, we know that folks want to walk to those things, and we build that into the score to account for that. Some data about Meridian specifically. We measured an 85th percent speed of 35 miles an hour. So if I understand correctly, that's speeding by about 10 miles an hour. It's not quite the average, but it is like a statistic that is intended to kind of capture the upper end of like the normal driver. Um, in a 24-hour volume of 876 vehicles, that probably sounds like a lot, but relative to other streets in the program, I'd say it's in the bottom half somewhere. Doesn't mean that we're, going to change our design based on it, but it's something to consider. And then the street width, we measured it, I think it floats between 33 and 33 and a half feet along the length. Um, it is a very straight road. So when we have straight and wide pavement, we see that does kind of create an incentive to go a little faster than we otherwise might go. This is a map. So this is goodness gracious. So it seems like every north-south street in Cleveland Park has applied for traffic calming, and Meridian was selected. So that's good news for you all. Hopefully, we can get to these other ones soon. I expect they see um, similar driving just based on the conditions here. Um, And then these blue dotted lines are projects in the neighborhood that have already been completed. So if anyone hasn't experienced traffic calming yet, kind of southern end of Meridian, Joseph and Lishi are good places that you could see an example of this installed in the field. Um, Next, we're going to talk about some of the tools we have in the toolkit. But before we dive into that, I want to pause and just see if anyone had questions about what we've covered so far, or really any other points of discussion.
I was going to say, I don't.
All right, we will keep on rolling. Um, So the first tool that we talk about are speed cushions. This is, by a pretty wide margin, the most common tool that we implement on a traffic calming project. And it's one of those physical solutions I mentioned earlier. So, unlike a speed limit sign or maybe striping that's asking people to drive slower, these will actually physically affect a car if it is going a certain speed. Um, so it's kind of that non-optional device that tends to bring the speeds of most of the cars down. Certainly, there are plenty of things that we can do to, suggest that folks drive slower, but this is one of the limited options that goes a little further than suggesting. Um, they're not that tall. They're about 3 inches high off the surface of the asphalt, and they're stretched out speed bumps essentially. So a vehicle would kind of hit that front part, go up, and then come back down the back. Um, they work similar to speed bumps, just not as jarring. So speed bumps are usually about 1 to 2 feet long, intended for slower speeds like 5 to 10 miles an hour, maybe like you'd find in a parking lot. These are intended to bring people down to like 20, 25 miles an hour. So not excessively slow speeds, just kind of in the realm of where we want people driving to keep everyone safe. Similar to speed cushions are speed tables. These basically work the exact same way, but they stretch all the way across the road. Um, we'll do these sometimes when we have kind of an off-width street where we're not able to fit, a great amount of speed cushions across. We do tend to avoid these anywhere we think will be important for emergency vehicle access. And with Meridian having a fire station on it just south of Cleveland, I think we'll probably lean towards speed cushions rather than tables when we put together our design and sort of finalize the details. I mentioned that these are sort of NDOT's preferred method, and that's because they've studied and determined that they're a good investment. The bar charts that we're looking at here are the results of 6 before and after studies of traffic calming projects that demonstrated the average speed coming down from 31 miles an hour to 22, and the 85th speed coming down from 37 to 25. So just as kind of a frame of reference, Meridian's 85th percent speed was 35 miles an hour. So we're really optimistic that if we do a good speed cushion based design, we'll get down to at or around the speed limit. There are plenty of instances that we're not able to rely only on speed cushions. They have grade constraints. So if there is a hill that's too steep for them, or perhaps a curve that's too sharp for drivers to see them with enough time, we'll sometimes lean on other tools, and radar feedback signs is one of those. So we generally don't prefer to only rely on signs like this, but they can be a useful tool to kind of incorporate in designs. They do have a more modest speed reduction, particularly immediately after they've been installed. Um, but unlike those speed cushions, they don't quite have that physical aspect to them that applies to anyone driving a vehicle on the street. We've also got pavement narrowing. If I'm not mistaken, this has been done already on Meridian to kind of define two 10-foot wide travel lanes. That's about as narrow as we tend to go because it's sort of the minimum amount it takes for two vehicles to pass each other safely. And it also helps to define either parking lanes, I think in the case of Meridian, or if you've got a narrower roadway, it can sort of facilitate some comfort in walking on the pavement. Not that, we don't need to still look out for cars when we're doing that, but it is something that make that experience a little more pleasant. Um, Bulb outs are something that we do on intersections that are larger than we think they need to be. Um, so when we have really kind of sweeping curves connecting streets, that allows people to take those turns pretty fast. So think about kind of an interstate ramp where you're speeding up and really making gradual turning movements versus like turning into your driveway or you really have to slow down to make a sharper turn. This is attempting to be kind of somewhere in the middle of those two. So not forcing traffic to come to a crawl, but trying to prevent folks from like really whipping around turns and perhaps not having the opportunity to see if somebody is trying to cross as a pedestrian. So we'll do these for really large intersections like we see at the top left, but we can also do these in areas where we have sight distance concerns. So in some neighborhoods, there's a lot of demand for street parking, such as the picture down on the bottom right. And we can also use these to basically enforce the existing parking regulations that specify nobody is allowed to park within 30 feet of a crosswalk. The reason for that rule is it obstructs the view and makes it more dangerous for those people who are, walking across the road. On some roads, we'll do chicanes. So that's basically where we take a wide road, narrow it down to that 20-foot minimum, but then zigzag the center line. Similar to bulb outs, that slows speeds by kind of forcing drivers to maneuver as they travel through them. Um, I'd say the major downside of these is they limit the amount of on-street parking. So if this is a neighborhood where kind of the supply of places to park in the public right of way is a major concern for people, we just want to tread carefully and make sure that we don't cause any additional problems while we're trying to fix another one. And lastly, we have traffic circles. These basically work the same way as bulb outs, but narrowing from the inside out instead of the outside in. Um, I will say, in order to install these without impeding those larger emergency vehicles, we need intersections that are pretty massive. Um, we're happy to take a look at any of them, but just based on my initial review of what we have in McFerrin Park, these would maybe be a challenge to fit in properly. But it's definitely something we're happy to investigate further if there is anyone who's enthusiastic about these. And that's it. So feel free to shoot me any questions about the tools. But right now I've switched to the concept design we put together for Meridian Street. Happy to kind of walk through what we're seeing here, or if you'd like to just kind of take a minute to digest, um, that's fine as well. Just to kind of get everyone oriented, north is to the left. So that's Douglas all the way over on the left side, and then Cleveland Street all the way down here on the right. And you'll see we're only proposing speed cushions right now. And if anyone's curious, I can kind of talk about some of the reasoning behind that and what we had in mind when we were putting this design together. Um, but yeah, I guess with that, I'll just kind of pause, take a minute for y'all to look, and then any questions you have, feel free to go for it.
I guess just a simple one. So say everyone loves this. How long does it take for it to be implemented?
That's a great question. Right now, our best guess is between 8 and 10 months after the ballot passes. So between tonight and then, there's 1 to 2 more steps. But we'll talk about sort of everything between tonight and the construction on the next slide, actually. Anything else?
I guess I have just a general, and I don't know if this is even, so with all of the construction and everything going on in our area,
Mhm.
like if we wanted, if say the neighbors on the street could get together and they wanted something done, like we all wanted trees put in and larger sidewalks, something like that, to to like correspond with this as well. How would we go about doing something like that to for it to have more of like a 12 South feel and to really like, you know, get it looking a little bit better than it is now? Do you know that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have like a super specific answer, but I can hopefully point you to some resources that will help. Um, in the immediate future, 2 days from now, NDOT is having a, a meeting where Cleveland Park and McFerrin Park will have the opportunity to provide feedback on their plans for what goes in after all of our water lines get replaced. Um,
Hmm.
so that has kind of a more comprehensive scope and set of options beyond like simply traffic calming on one street. So that would be one way. Um,
I just in thinking about like, if it were instead of this, maybe a narrowing, like you had on something else and and bulking out the sidewalks and putting in some of the, vegetation or something, just like a complete overhaul, I think is why I'm bringing it to you.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, that's a great question. I would say kind of that like East Nashville water replacement project is a good place to start.
Okay.
Um, I'm not sure that this street is probably going to be a high priority for like
Mm.
sidewalk type projects in the near future, just
Mhm.
because I know that um, there are a lot of streets, Dickerson Pike included, that just like have none at all, and
Right.
it's taken just about everything we've got to really scratch the surface of that backlog.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm loving the idea of kind of the like landscaping, beautification sort of thing, and I think that there are ways that we can make some small improvements in that direction, maybe without like a full rebuild of the street. Um, so I guess that the second resource I'll point you to is Nashville's brand new tactical urbanism program. And
Okay.
what that is intended to be is sort of like neighborhood funded and implemented right of way changes that are ostensibly on like a temporary basis, but kind of like maintained by folks who live there. So that's something that I've like lightly entertained in other spots around town. Um, but it's worth looking into if that kind of approach is something that you're interested in or passionate about, um, because it sounds like a pretty cool program. I'm not directly involved, but I know it's out there.
Okay.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, this is Daisha Harvey. And I'm here with my husband Justin. And I was just curious, I won't speak for him, but the picture that you have in the upper left-hand corner of the type of speed cushions, is that you guys saying like that's the kind that will be put in on our road? Or do we have the option to voice if we would prefer the kind that's on like the southern part of Meridian down by the fire station?
Um, yeah, happy to hear any feedback. Um, I will say, in terms of the specific product, these are the same like material. I
Mm-hmm.
think that between 3 and 4 is probably the right width. they're all 6 feet wide. We're going to do what we can to avoid putting these delineators up. These are generally only used when we have like bike lanes or perhaps if it's a bus route that needs to have those cushions positioned a certain way, we might have them that way. But I guess I'll just ask, what do you like about the ones that are further south on Meridian?
I like that they're longer. When I
Mhm.
go over them, they tend to be less jarring than the ones that are shorter, like what is pictured. When I go over
Mhm.
those, it's just more jarring for my car, really. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. The others just feel more gentle to me.
It's also,
And I like the way that they look better too, personally. What were you gonna say?
Mhm.
because also the fire truck goes on.
Oh yeah. I think I'm hearing you.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so that makes sense. Um, do I understand correctly? The speed limit on Meridian is posted at 25.
20, 20.
Oh, it's at 20. Wow. Okay, well that's
Yeah.
cool. Um, good to know. Um, yeah, so in scenarios like that is where we do tend to lean toward the shorter cushions. The
Okay.
longer ones are more intended for the kind of 30-mile-an-hour like collector level range.
Okay.
Um,
And
but
that
it,
makes sense
it's
because that part of Meridian is 30 miles per hour.
mhm.
Okay. And then I had another question too.
Sure.
I'm sure this isn't really part of your project for this part of the street specifically, but where Meridian meets Douglas,
Mhm.
Justin and I kind of like the visual that you had of that, one of the bulb outs. Um, yeah, can you go back? The bottom right.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that. That intersection is, and there's a fire hydrant on one of the corners, and people park right in front of it constantly on Douglas. And
Uh-huh.
it's, I try to avoid that intersection when I can.
Yeah, it's hard to see also when you go up there. You're trying to look right because people are. You can't,
Got it. Mhm.
Yeah,
and sometimes you can't even see left because people are on the left side.
and it might help with people turning onto our street too quickly.
Yeah,
Too, because they tend to like
sometimes some
screech
people,
around that corner.
if you make a turn, well, even if you're not going to take a right hand,
Yeah.
you will.
Um,
Sometimes there'll be a car that if you're like not going fast. Oh god.
yeah. I will say I'm having a hard time hearing you, but I think I've picked up enough that I've gotten the gist that basically people are going faster on Douglas, and when they enter Meridian, there's not enough kind of transition cues to keep them from continuing at that speed.
Right.
So that'll make sense.
And having
And
people park
uh,
close to the intersection.
yeah, and that's exactly the kind of thing that these things are helpful for preventing. So I think I've heard enough to know that it's probably a good idea to look into. Um, Someone who's been there recently, is there still a bike lane on Douglas, or has that gone away at this spot?
I don't. I remember they did a testing where they put different lines on our street, testing
Mhm.
out different things, and I don't think any of those exist anymore, to my knowledge.
I don't know.
Okay, I got it. Well, that sounds good. I'll look into that myself, but noted that this intersection could probably use some work. It is something we do, like we're allowed to, you know, do things all the way up until the end of the project. Um, One thing I will say is because we're designing a traffic calming project on a road that we know is going to be repaved, maybe not immediately, but in kind of the near future. Um, we may like coordinate with that follow-up effort and see if it's more effective to just put those in at that time. But we'll make our recommendations. I think if nothing else, we'll get the speed cushions, on time, because those are pretty easy to remove, pave, and then put back down. The striping and delineators that go into the bulb outs are just a little more involved. So it's possible that it would kind of be implemented in 2 phases that way. But we'll sort of coordinate that on our end. If anyone does go to the meeting on Thursday with the sidewalk spikeways program, they'll probably have more up-to-date information about timing and things like that. But I just wanted to make you all aware that like those 2 teams are kind of we're coordinating amongst ourselves to make sure this happens sensibly.
So would this be before the water mains are all replaced?
That's a good question. So I know that the water project has 2 phases, phase 1 in McFerrin Park and phase 2 in Cleveland Park. I haven't heard a lot about the timing of that, but I think the idea is that cushions are kind of quick and easy enough that we would be fine with putting them down before the water replacement. And then, should they be in the way of a line, it's just a matter of like unbolting those pieces and then
Okay.
putting them back. They're secure, but they're just bolted down with a lot of bolts. So it's not too difficult to pull them up and then put them back down in the event of a repaving.
Okay. And yeah, just to echo what they were like, I live in between these two, Stacy and Justin and Daisha. So it's just, but Douglas, like going from Meridian to Douglas, like you cannot see to take a left-hand turn. It's really scary because of just all the cars on the street, and they go fast. So
Yeah.
you could put those in your notes or whatever, but yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I've got it written down that kind of sight lines there are a particular struggle.
Yeah.
Any other intersections that we should like keep an eye on? I guess I'll let you all know. We're gonna do a site visit after this meeting to kind of verify the assumptions we've made, make sure that we're looking at everything correctly. But before I do that, I just if there's anything you think we should be considering while we're out there, let me know.
I was wondering, how do you guys decide on the spacing of the cushions? Like where you guys place them along the road?
That's a great question. The range that we use is between 300 feet and 500 feet. Those are based on recommendations from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, who have done kind of like nationwide studies of a lot of different traffic calming programs. But basically, that spacing shoots the gap between being so close that they're both cumbersome and like kind of a waste of resources, but they're not far enough apart that you can get back up to a dangerous speed before you encounter the next one.
Okay, cool. And I'm assuming you guys are placing them where there are no driveways. Like
That's correct.
on driveways. Okay.
Yeah, so we shoot for a 15-foot clearance between the edge of a driveway and the edge of a cushion. Some neighborhoods, that constraint is like really hard to meet. So if you could imagine like all of these lots had a 20-foot wide driveway and they were like staggered from each other, it would be really difficult to do that.
Yeah.
Here we do not have that problem, so I'm pretty confident we'll be able to find fairly reasonable placements for all of these.
Okay, cool.
Y'all want to talk about the kind of next steps, how the project will progress after he?
Mhm.
Right. So this flowchart is the whole program as a given project moves through. So as you all may know, this started with an application submitted during one of the 2 cycles. I would recommend that the application period is open now, but pretty much everywhere in this neck of the woods has already been applied for, so we're good in that regard. We're at this neighborhood meeting in the red circle. So following this, we're going to take the input we've gotten from you all, do our site visit, kind of refine our concept design, and then we'll have a set of construction plans on our hands to move forward with. At that point, we can either schedule a second neighborhood meeting to sort of review, what we've got on paper there, and then move to an online ballot and then construction. We can also post those plans online for people to review on their own, and then send out our ballots a little bit earlier and not meet that second time. It is up to everyone on the phone tonight. So if anyone has a preference, if they prefer to skip that second meeting or have it, feel free to let me know. Either speaking up or in the chat is also fine.
You want us to let you know now? I'm good with us just charging forward is my vote.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Cool.
Second meeting just be to like look at the design? Oh yeah, design modifications addressed. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if as long as you're already sending out the design, and then we can just do the online ballot. I don't think we need a second neighborhood meeting either.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. There are some streets where we'll leave with plans to kind of change course significantly. And yeah, I'd kind of agree this one's a little more straightforward than those more extreme cases. I'll finish talking about this and then get to the question in the chat. But so the online ballot will happen after we post those plans, and then should it pass with 66% of favorable votes, then we'll order the materials and get this into the construction queue. Oh, got it. So I can ignore the question about the bike lanes. Can I ask you all what bike lanes you're talking about? I'm curious now.
I don't know, it was your question to us about, you were asking if there were any bike lanes on Douglas near that
Oh,
intersection. And
mhm.
Justin and I were saying, we don't think so. And I was just asking Catherine if she's aware.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
That's just all
That
the
sounds good.
questions. Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, I don't know.
Got it. Yeah, I think there were some, like maybe a couple years ago. The Tour de Nash came through this neck of the woods. I want to say maybe in like 2022. I think there might have been bike lanes on Douglas at that time. But anyway, um, we'll leave that discussion for another time. Some information about the balloting. So we'll send out similar mailers to the ones that invited you all to this meeting. Basically, it's a postcard with a QR code and a link to get onto NDOT's balloting form. And when you get that, you'll be able to view the plans on NDOT's website and then say yes or no, I want the project to proceed, or no, I don't want the project to proceed. We leave the period open for 6 weeks just as an attempt to give people time to get the mail, but we also, some neighborhoods prefer to kind of like go knock on some doors, talk to their neighbors, let everyone know like, hey, I got my card, did you get yours? That sort of thing. But then it does close after 6 weeks so that we can, stay on track and not let these projects drag out for too long. As I mentioned before, 2/3 of the respondents have to vote yes for it to move forward. but that's not 2/3 of everyone on the street. So if the three of you all voted and one person voted no and the other two people voted yes, that would be a successful project. A little bit about the ballot zone. So basically, it is all owners of the parcels that have a property line abutting the affected right-of-way. So this diagram on the left is that area. Condos are a little interesting because they're owned in common property touches it. So even if, the folks kind of off to the side down on Cleveland Street don't look directly out onto Meridian, we'll still send them mailers with those postcards. Churches and schools each get a vote. It's one vote per person. So if one person owned like half the street, they wouldn't get to vote, 30 times. So we do a little bit of data cleaning that way. And then vacant properties are ineligible. That's really just asking if it's like a completely empty lot or like a building that's clearly under construction. We don't do any like heavy research, trying to find out if a given building is occupied or not. And then operating businesses are not eligible. So if it's like a sandwich shop or probably, I think this might be a future hotel or something down the corner, things like that, um, we don't include since we're sort of more focused on the residential side of this this program. Any
So-
questions? Oh, go ahead.
In regards to that, if
Sure.
there's a lot of like rentals on the
Mhm.
street, so does it go to the homeowner or the rental property, the mailer?
Yeah, so what we do to create the mailing list is pull all of the Register of Deeds records for these properties, and those only list the owner of that parcel. I think it's also has to do with just kind of like the long-term nature of the project. But anyway, it's the owners of those parcels that will receive the ballots. But to anyone who may be renting, if you feel strongly one way or another, we encourage you to get in touch with your landlord and just say like, hey, I think this would be a really great improvement for the neighborhood. Would love if you'd vote yes on this. That's one option that those who are renting can be engaged as well.
Perfect. And then another question, if if someone loses their mailer, can they still vote? Or
Yes.
yeah, okay.
So basically, every person on our list that we pull is assigned a unique ballot code. That'll get entered into the form when you vote, and I'll use it to just make sure that every vote we're getting is legit and someone's not just like, sending in a bunch of junk responses. So if anyone thinks they should have gotten a ballot card and hasn't, they can reach out to NDOT and myself. We'll like look them up on the list to see if they're there and then send them the code if they're missing it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that sort of ties into like the talking to the neighbors bit. Just want to make sure that if anyone's really excited to vote on this thing, we just want to make sure everyone is kind of keeping an eye out when those postcards start to come.
And when will they start? I think it was on I took a screenshot, but when do you mail those?
Basically, as soon as we're done with the design, we'll post it online and then send out the mail.
Okay.
I would estimate if we're not having the second meeting, maybe like 3 to 4 weeks, just to give us time to do our visit and then draft up those plans and everything.
Perfect.
Sure. Any other questions? I'm going to leave my contact information up on the screen for anyone who'd like to have it. Oh, and I will say, if you email me, also copy that other email address, n.trafficcalming@nashville.gov. That'll sort of help everyone stay in the loop. And then if I'm out for some reason or something else, you'll have kind of backup to cover any questions or feedback you might have. All right. Well, if any other questions do come up, don't hesitate to reach out. We also plug NDOT's social media presence. They are pretty good about letting folks know when to show up for things that they might engage in. And then this QR code will lead to trafficcalming.nashville.gov. That's our website that has a lot of information about the program and sort of our processes, things like that.
I forgot I did have one question. You
Sure.
mentioned that did you say 2 days from now, Cleveland Park and McFerrin Park are having some kind of meeting?
Yeah, so the Cleveland Park Neighborhood Association and the McFerrin Park Neighborhood Association are having a joint meeting where NDOT will be on the agenda to present some of their concepts for what's going to happen after all that water replacement work gets done. I don't exactly know what's proposed, but it's in the realm of walkability and bikeability improvements, kind of in the whole neighborhood, and not only on Meridian Street.
Well, especially when Oracle is developed and that bridge goes, I think there's supposed to be a bridge from Cleveland to over there. I just like, it's going to be chaos over here.
Mhm.
Bridge and or tunnel. Well,
Yeah.
we'll
So,
see what they decide on.
yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely a major change coming down the pipeline.
It'll be good to have some of this stuff, if the neighbors want it, in place to kind of control the speeding. So
Yeah, we kind of say, like, we don't try to reduce the amount of traffic drastically. We're really shooting for just anyone who's driving on the street should be doing so safely. Well, anything else before we wrap up?
I'm good.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for your time this evening. Like I said, feel free to reach out should anything else come up. But otherwise, yeah, be looking for those postcards in the mail, and we'll get those plans posted online as soon as we're able to.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
David.
Of course.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You
Okay,
too.
you too.
Bye.
Bye.